All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and start at least with our introduction. So as people are filing in, first of all, welcome to HBSWA's event for today. We really appreciate everybody being here. We just want to remind you that one of the greatest things about our events that are calling in so many people these days is that our network has actually grown in the last year and a half to double its size prior. And that, as many of you know, is related to the fact that we recently took the club national from the historic roots of the HBSWA of New York. We are now national and in fact global. We are the HBS Association for Women Alumni. So we're very pleased to have you here. And I know, although I don't know all of the names and faces that I see here, do know quite a few of you. But I know that a lot of you may be new members because we've welcomed so many of you. I believe that Alexi yesterday told me that we hit 600 members yesterday. So that is a really momentous occasion. We're one of the biggest clubs, if not the biggest club of HBS in the country. So that just speaks to the power of the great women that we have in this network. And one of them is going to speak to us today. So I will, at the end of this, we will have a reminder about additional events that are coming up. There is a really robust pipeline. We have today Deborah McConkey, who is our head of programming, and she stepped into the role this summer. So hello, Deborah. Deborah has got a great slate and a great team of volunteers who are helping to fill the calendar. So if you look at the events listings, we'll remind you of that at the end. You will see there's a lot more coming up, and we encourage you to register for anything that you can make because there are some really amazing speakers coming up. So with that, I am going to turn my attention to today's amazing speaker. We are so lucky to have Dr. Gaby Cora with us. So HBS alumna, Dr. Gaby Cora, she's a licensed physician. She is an executive coach. She works extensively in consulting and working with companies in many different industries to understand lots of strategic, complicated business problems. And in fact, she holds a certificate in artificial intelligence for business strategy from MIT. So if we didn't think she was great already, you got to know there's a lot of layers to Gaby. So we're very happy to have her here. And in the business realm, Gaby is co-founder and chief medical officer at Phalanx, which is an app that is revolutionizing the ability to harness AI to deliver personalized emotional support and strategy. So things that are really on the cutting edge of how technology is used in healthcare and personal wellness. Also, Gaby is the author of ExecutiveHealth.com's Leading Under Pressure, Strategies to Avoid Burnout,
supporting each other personally and professionally without the need to compete or impress.
Okay,
I've heard
last
people
reminder, if
reference it
everybody
as
can mute
their
themselves.
cabinet or their close board of
Alexi, I don't know if you
advisors.
can
almost,
mute
is
everybody.
some ways that people have described their circle.
If you can see. Okay, let me keep
And
going.
in terms of where did circles originate and what's the backstory?
Hey, that sounded like a mute. Thank you. Okay, I just was saying Gaby is also an author. So she's the author of ExecutiveHealth.com's Leading Under Pressure, Strategies to Avoid Burnout, Increase Energy, and Improve Your Well-Being. And that topic is what brought us here today. So she has actually spoken on this topic to audiences before. She holds a degree of MD, MBA, and MHA. And she works with lots of companies and a wide variety of executive leaders to really understand the professional and physical and mental challenges of leading under pressure. So who else but to speak to us about leading under pressure today? So with that, Gaby, thank you for being here. I'm going to pass things over to you to start your presentation.
Well, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. I'm so thrilled to be here with you, and here a shout out to my GMP 35 group. It's been, you know, I've really waited to do the GMP program for about 20 years. And sometimes, you know, the timing just needs to be right for many of us as women. You're going to see a little bit of my own journey and path and how I try to put everything together, not just for me, but for many other very busy executives, professionals, and leaders just like you. And so a lot of what I'm going to relay to you is just, you know, trying to put all of that together from those own experiences, as well as some of the science that we do know and that we do have about leading under pressure. I need to apologize because my presentation is on the monitor, so you're sometimes going to see me go back and forth. instead of having it just in front of me. So I'm now looking straight at the camera on my computer, but you're going to see me kind of shifting a little bit just so that I can present a couple of things to you. Oh, let me see. So, one of the things that we struggle as women is how can we do it all, right? And in my path to being as successful as I've wanted to be, but while balancing a good lifestyle and, really trying to interact and have a great family relationship as well, I really realized we can really do it all, but just not all at once. And I think that this is one key point in terms of saying, well, if we can do it all, but not just all at once, how do I decide what to do first, second, and third? So this is a little bit of what we're going to be chatting about today. One of the most important things for me is to find your driving force. So it's try to figure out what is important about you that makes you unique and that really drives you to wake up and go to work in the morning or go garden in the morning or go, do whatever it is that you want to do in the morning. What is it that is so important to you? And I think sometimes that may not be as easy for us to decide just because we get so busy with life, right? The second point is to recognize any of those key pressure points that make our lives difficult. So for me, for example, I've always been able to be very cool in critical events, but maybe something that's repetitive and that just, may frustrate me or bother me. So things like that may be important for us to try to figure out. And the third point, which is quite important here, is how are we able to kind of do it all? How do we create those strategies and how do we prioritize? How do we know what's important to us today? And how do we know what's going to be important for us tomorrow? And the third part, or the last part here, is how do we put it all together? And I have this acronym about living with love that I'm going to share with you today. So one of the most important things about health for us in psychiatry in particular is we always look at the biopsychosocial model. And I think the way medicine is today, we're looking more at disease states and illness, and it's sometimes hard for us to maximize or optimize our health and wellness and go to the next level. And, in general, with all your experiences with physicians in particular, I think we've kind of stayed behind as physicians in helping people optimize their health. We tend to go to the physician only when we're sick. Instead of just going to try to continue to improve. And then there's so much going on with anti-aging and longevity that it makes it really hard to have a good physician that's thinking a little bit about everything, including lifestyle coaching and other things that we could also implement. So this is one area of a lot of interest and that poses challenges as well. Now, how about well-being? Well-being is really that state of being happy, healthy, and prosperous. And that is what I've always aspired to reach out. And this is what I want to share with you about those lessons learned. So going into leading under pressure, if you have pencil and paper close to you, grab it now because we're going to go through a quick quiz. So Dr. Miller kindly gave me this blurb for the book, Leading Under Pressure. Is there any other kind of real leadership? Like anybody who's in a leadership role is going to deal with pressure. And it's not just pressure at the job. Sometimes people think that you can compartmentalize having kids and then forgetting that you have kids while you're at work, but you're a mom 24/7. It's not like you're just a mom when you're with your kids. You're always trying to make sure that they're okay. So, this stems a bit from those introspective insights that I've wondered about for a long time. So this is the book cover for Leading Under Pressure. And if you've already grabbed pencil and paper, in the book, I include a more extensive burnout quiz. But I was actually reached out by Leslie Kuo from the Wall Street Journal back in 2013. I published the book in 2010, actually. And I first wrote it and self-published it before I actually published it through Career Press. But in any case, Leslie contacted me and she asked me if I could create just 10 questions around burnout, and this is what the quiz is about. Otherwise, you can go to Burnout Quiz and try to fill out the form there, but we're going to go through these 10 questions pretty fast. So these are the 10 questions as published. Question number 1. I have medical problems because of excessive stress. I experience tension headaches, anxiety, depression, heart problems, or GI problems. And just rate yourself as, 1, strongly disagree, 2, disagree, 3, neutral, 4, agree, 5, strongly agree. Number 2, I have increased my alcohol drinking at night to unwind from a stressful day. Same scale. Number 3, I get easily annoyed with friends and family when I come back because of stress at work. We've all been there, right? Number 4, I have been stressed out for the past 6 months. So it's relentless. Number 5, I give all my energy to my work and I have no energy left in the evenings and over the weekend. Number 6, I feel my job security is threatened. Number 7, the thought of going to work every day stresses me out. Number 8, I'm stressed out all the time. Number 9, I have been to the emergency room thinking I was having a heart attack and was told I had a panic attack instead. And number 10, I take sleeping pills over the counter or prescribed to sleep at night. These are the 10 questions. So just add your score. And these are the results. So if you scored anywhere from 0 to 16, you're showing occasional signs of stress, but appear to be coping well with job pressure. From 17 to 33, you're managing stress well, but you occasionally stress out. You can still revert to a healthy state. Now, from 34 to 50, you may be at serious risk of burnout if you aren't burned out already. In addition to regular exercise, meals, rest, and relaxation, consider seeking help to improve your health and your performance at work. So if we had more time, I would just, start engaging everyone and asking everybody about where you've scored with a show of hands and just trying to, figure out what your experience has been. In my experience, running these with leaders in general, I've really seen high numbers for burnout. So just to share that with you. One of the reasons that led me to write Leading Under Pressure, almost a couple of decades ago, was because I was seeing very successful executives not only burning out, but going on short-term disability. People who were doing super well at work, but they just needed some time off. They just needed some time to just recoup, breathe in, and try to, figure out what they wanted to do with their lives. Sometimes they made a ton of money, but it wasn't about the money. They made a ton of money, but, they weren't spending quality time with their kids. During the first time that I worked with at Pfizer, which was about 20 years ago, my kids were early teens. And there was one point in which my daughter told me, and she's very wise beyond her years, but she pretty much said she did not miss me anymore. Just because I was traveling so much that, she was just getting used to and just being adaptive to my frequent travel. Now that did, touch me to the core. I was like, that is very interesting. That, a kid who is able to verbalize what's going on is telling me that I'm away quite a bit of my time. And actually, that was one of the reasons behind me moving on and doing other consulting work that I could pick and choose to do. So just, relating some of those experiences. But one of the other elements that I saw is that many people who were saying they were burnt out were actually ill. So they were already experiencing many medical issues. The thing is, burnout is probably more of a word that many people feel more comfortable speaking of, because it kind of relates to you working hard and just working too hard. So it makes us feel a bit more powerful as compared to saying that we may just be ill out of being overworked and not taking time off for ourselves. Now, one of the interesting things about stress is that we all face stress, right? And we all need a good quantity of stress to thrive. I've seen most successful people are the ones who may have some dreams prior to a big negotiation or something big at work. They may have a dream about whether or not they're going to pass or finish high school, and they may already have a doctorate degree. So sometimes we try to process all this underlying stress in other ways, for example, through sleep and dreams. But, just in this balance between stress and well-being, a little bit of stress is good and may still allow for us to experience well-being. But if we have too much of that stress, it's going to be harder to have that experience. Now, if you look at workplace stress, there's a couple of things that I just want to bring to your attention. So in regards to workplace stress, I think it is more interesting, particularly after the pandemic. The pandemic, just accelerated a lot of what was already going on. And I think people are more open about verbalizing these concerns. Imagine whether or not you can still do remote work if your employer is asking you to come back to work. Imagine your own struggles if you are the employer and you're trying to figure out who could come back to work or if everybody can continue to do remote work. Imagine the competition that now is now in place. Before you could probably aspire to interview for a job. Let's say that you're based in New York and there were plenty of jobs in New York, but now many of these jobs are posted remotely. So your competition in New York is now open globally. And guess what? If people can pay less in other places to do a similar kind of job, they may hire people from abroad. So these are just some issues for us to think about. And I think the other thing that I've observed with this workplace stress is, I think over the past couple of decades, men have become a lot more involved in household and and other issues with the family and the kids, which I think has extended a bit of this burnout or other concerns about stress. Because I think that now most parents tend to be quite stressed. Another point to think about is how loneliness and isolation are also affecting us. And this is interesting, not just for us, if we were by ourselves, but also parents, if we're taking care of parents, or if we're caregivers to other people as well, or neighbors. So this is just interesting that people are taking notice, like the Surgeon General. Now, I thought this was interesting, and this is just about a month old, with the Surgeon General, again, issuing an advisory board on the mental health and well-being of parents with everything that's going on. So these are real things. I love the fact that more people are looking into some of these things, just because, having seen these things firsthand years and years ago kind of seals the deal in very many ways. Like, we were on the right track back then. These are just some medical issues with some stress components, just to share with you. They could be psychiatric, endocrine, GI, cardiovascular, immune suppression. The interesting thing about seeing how stress affects this is the worsening of the conditions or taking longer to resolve these issues. One point I want to also stress about stress is how important it is to understand that if you're stressed out during the course of the day, it's going to be really difficult to not experience stress when you go to bed. And this is one of the reasons behind people struggling with being super wired during the day and not being able to turn off so that they can have a relaxed sleep time at night. Couple of other things: stress can be acute, it could be chronic. You can also see that it could be periodic, it could happen every once in a while, it could be occasional with different intensities, or it could be cumulative. What I've seen in general with leaders that are going through huge transitions, transformations, big critical events, big changes, is that cumulative pattern. It's not like it comes and goes, but it's like you may just need to do more with less. And this happens quite a bit, for example, with massive layoffs. So the folks who stay behind are stressed out because they don't know what's going to happen with their own jobs, and now they need to do double or triple duty to help the employer with the jobs that have been discontinued. So another lesson learned from a long time ago from our ancestors, I guess, if we lived in the ideal world, we would probably be awake 8 hours a day. We would probably, enjoy pleasurable activities another 8 hours a day, and we would probably sleep 8 hours per night, right? But, the reality is that for busy leaders, our real world looks more like this. And what first happens, and the patterns that I've always seen, include the fact that to stay awake to work, you first get rid of your pleasurable activities, which usually include exercise, for example. So oftentimes I would see people either gaining weight or having, yes, usually gaining weight, but also by not having exercising, they're not distressing nicely either. Now, what happens if you don't have any more pleasurable activities left and you still need to work some more, then that's when you're going to reduce your sleep time. So try to think about some of these things and see how these are affecting you in your everyday life. Like, keep these things in consideration. Another super important cycle that I've seen as a psychiatrist in particular is this using stimulants to stay awake cycle, and then needing to use hypnotics to sleep cycle. And in general, the most commonly used stimulants include drinks, sugar and caffeinated drinks. But for example, I've had patients come in to see me so that I would help them with amphetamine so that they could stay a second night awake, so that they could continue to carry on doing work with, let's say China or somewhere on the other part of the hemisphere. And it's like, that's not really healthy. So you could do some of these things occasionally if you need to stay overnight to do something important, but it's just going to be really hard to be able to thrive and continue to do well if you want to do this on a regular basis. We do need our sleep, and it's going to be really important for us to make sure that we keep this into consideration. I have obviously also seen many people who've used cocaine when they've exhausted everything else to be able to stay awake as a stimulant. Now, at night, this is the same thing. People usually start with over-the-counter or PM kinds of over-the-counter medications, but then alcohol is one of the most commonly used ones. But I've seen also people use benzodiazepines, barbiturates, or a combination of those. Just keep this into consideration as well. This is just to reflect and just to invite you to reflect on your own journey. And I want you to see at some of the patterns of what I may have included here. Each one of us has his or her own journey. But I just wanted to share a little bit of how, I've come to think about some of these things, because this is what really led me to bring the Live with Love part. So just to share a little bit of that. I was born in Brooklyn. My parents are of Italian descent, and we moved to Argentina when I was 4 years old. I went to the same British school from age 4 till age 17, then went into biochemistry. The picture you see in the middle to the left is my husband and I after completing the 3rd year of a 6-year program in medicine. And then we got pregnant at the age of 22. By the age of the one in the middle is when we were 25 years old, coming back to the States with 2 kids, a 2 and a 1-year-old. Our daughter, who's the oldest one, had obstetric paralysis. So, we had to take her for physical therapy as well as going to med school, as well as taking care of another newborn in the case of my son. And then the picture that you will see after the NIH and some other experiences with the American Psychiatric Association, those are my 2 kids but this picture was taken about 10 or 15 years ago. They're now in their mid-30s. So just to share with you a little bit of that experience. The picture on the right in the middle is with my husband going to the beach. So it's just like carrying those camping gear in regards to that. Other pictures, you know, with family, with my Harvard Living Group. These are just some of the things that have been so important to me. And the last one on the bottom right hand side is New Year's a couple of years ago. And you're going to see my son with his wife. My husband is in between. My husband's next to our 2 grandkids. And then I'm next to my daughter and her wife. So this is, you know, this is my family. So any questions up to now? No? Okay. So what do we do with all of this? How do we put it all together? So I know that I'm super stressed out. I know I'm burnt out. I know I have other issues. What do I do now? So I came up with this acronym years ago just to try to simplify it as much as I could, something that is actually pretty complex in very many ways, but just to share with you some of those lessons learned. So LOVE stands for lifestyle strategies, organizational skills, values, and enjoy. And I'll share with you some key points about these. In terms of lifestyle, I love to think about the 4 pillars of health. Think about nutrition, exercise, relaxation, and sleep. Why? These are usually the ones that we struggle with when we're pretty busy as leaders. We either undereat or overeat if we're traveling quite a bit and if we're living in different hotels. It's hard to exercise also if we lose track of our habits. Relaxation techniques that would be so helpful for many of us are kind of like, we don't know how to do them or we don't know what helps. And in regards to sleep, there's so much out there that it's quite complicated for us to realize how important sleep is for all of us and to stay healthy. This is from Harvard, and this is just a clear way to look at your plate. You know, realizing that plant-based nutrition is very helpful, that eating well is more important than taking supplements or taking too many vitamins or trying to, you know, again, supplement away instead of just having a healthy lunch or dinner or meal with, preferably with your family if you can, but at least with yourself so you're not rushing. To this day, I can't eat while I'm standing, or I can, but I choose not to. And even as a resident, and it gets really busy as a resident. I was a resident during times in which we had to work sometimes 36 hours straight. And I would always sit down, even if it was for 5 minutes, so that I would not rush with my meals. I have seen people who can kind of stand up and just eat as they go. And I just think it's really interesting and challenging for me to do that. But just think about filling your plate with whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and really drinking plenty of water. That's going to be one of the most important things. And I'm happy to give you the slides. But this is, sometimes people ask me about the difference between, plant-based foods and eaters, and what's the difference between some of these diets. So you have the flexitarian diet, polo-vegetarian, pescatarian, lacto-ovo-vegetarian, lacto-vegetarian, fully plant-based, and vegan. In my case in particular, I became super interested in all the nutritional part when my father became ill back in around 2015. And we became very strict plant-based eaters at the time. I would say I'm probably about 90%, 90 plus plant-based, and occasionally I eat some other things. But this is just, again, a general, just a general sharing. Exercise. You know, I find the recommendations by the CDC just interesting, because in my experience, 30 minutes of exercise for busy executives and professionals and leaders just does not cut it. If you're sitting down long hours with no breaks, I would say that 30 minutes is really insufficient. So you would need to try to find ways in which you could either exercise more earlier in the day and try to go for walks or do some other things that you can during the day. I actually have a Nordic track in my office, and I also have one of those trampolines as well that I could use, but I really try to go out and just walk. I have a 15-year-old dog, a border collie, so I can't walk fast with him. I have to kind of go around and walk at his pace. Because otherwise having a young dog would be super helpful for most people. And, you know, just to keep these things in mind. I've also seen that for people who travel quite a bit, muscle strengthening exercises are super important. In my case, you know, I remember just losing several pounds, probably just from dehydration from traveling to 3 different cities within a week in the past. So to just keep that in mind. I've seen this, you know, the exercise part as a very important and interesting part. And more so for people who travel a lot across meridians, different parts of the world. Just keep this in mind. Try to keep your habits as well as you can. This is a part that I love around relaxation. Part of the reason why I used to help with hypnosis as well. I would help my patients with hypnosis and relaxation techniques. And so why is it so important? Well, it will help you slow your breathing, lower your blood pressure, and reduce your heart rate. There are so many benefits from relaxation techniques that try to address stress directly. There's different techniques. Most of them involve some kind of either progressive relaxation, progressive muscle relaxation, and or guided imagery or visualizations that you can do. In my experience working with people, I would say that trying to really implement meditation, relaxation, prayer techniques on a daily basis would be probably preferable in the morning, but you really also need to create transitions of relaxation prior to going to bed. You cannot read the news if you need to go to bed right away. You're just going to be wired. You're going to be like, you know, with all the news that we have from around the world, it's going to be really difficult to relax. So keep that in mind. There's so many relaxation benefits for, you know, for our minds and our bodies. And this is just a nice list of them. You could even improve digestion with just slowing your pace in which you eat so that you're not just eating in 5 minutes. So things like that are usually quite important. Another relaxation benefit that I felt from exercise has been also with the repetitive exercises. You know, it may be different for different people, but for me, within minute 15 to 20 of either being on an elliptical or walking fast or doing something, again, that's repetitive, I would get into that zone, which is like a meditative like state as well, where you feel like you're super focused in your mind, but you're very relaxed in your body as well. So that's another technique you could use, combining exercise that's repetitive and trying to find that zone point with relaxation. Now, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, you know, has this position statement that sleep is a biological necessity. I think we sometimes minimize how important sleep is, and we probably value it more as, you know, later on when we realize how much we missed from that lack of sleep. But just keep in mind that even if you're sleeping, let's say 5 hours during the course of a week, and you think that you're going to be able to sleep 10 hours on a Saturday and Sunday, you're never going to regain whatever you lost from sleep. So keep that in mind as well. This is a nice sleep diary that you can use, and you can see how, you know, drinking caffeinated drinks, drinking alcohol, exercising may affect your sleep patterns as well. And again, this is from the NIH. Okay, so we went through lifestyle. How about organizational skills? To do it all and to try to figure out what to do first, second, and third, I don't know how we can get away without these organizational skills. And I think that for very successful moms and leaders, and caregivers. You know, it's like we do that. We're masters at doing this. We really are. So my daughter actually helped me prepare this for leading under pressure years and years ago, but just to another acronym to try to remember a simple way. AIM, I am, where I am is improve, achieve, and maintain your goal. And you know, the AIM part is align, integrate, and manage your plan. And I want to make 2 points around this. One is that I've always found that people who are able to be more insightful and reflect even on their accomplishments usually try to stay there before they move on to the next step. I think that that part of maintaining your goal is essential so that you can evaluate everything that you've already done. You can assess all those accomplishments and then try to figure out what you need to do next. I think part of the reason why many people are stressed out these days is that we don't have that maintenance part at all. We're just going, and we're not able to just give ourselves a pat on the shoulder, take a breath, and continue to move on. The plan part with the alignment, the integration, and the management part becomes very important so that the more that we can align our own selves with other people or jobs, the better off we're going to be as well. So for example, I was once invited to give a talk on leading under pressure with KPMG. The managers wanted me to give the talk, and yet they were present during the conversation. And I was talking about, you know, life-work balance and how I thought it was a myth. And it was more about really being able to integrate all of this. But at the same time, so the managers wanted people to take a breath, but at the same time, if they expected, let's say, a document by midnight, they would push for that too. So we've all been in those situations where we need to be ready for urgent situations. And that is okay, as long as we are able to organize ourselves so that we're not just trying to put off fires all the time, so that we can kind of plan ahead. So hopefully this is helpful too. Now, the values part, I think, is very important. As you could probably see from my journey, there's a lot about my family. So family business to me is very important. So what happens if I'm in a job situation, for example, and people at my job don't really care about my family? You could just realize that it's probably not going to be a long-term situation where we're going to be aligned. There's going to be some disconnect there. There's some misalignment there too. I've seen that in couples as well. The times in which people end up separating or going separate ways is because their values may have changed, or, you know, priorities and other interests may have changed. So there's usually that part of misalignment. So think about these values and how they, you know, how you are able to conceptualize these values on a personal level, what's important for the family, culturally, professionally, organizationally, and within your environment. And the last part is enjoy. I think that planning, having the purpose, bringing it top of our list, to have a joyful day, to have a joyful life, is going to be very significant for our success within this part. And so I want to inspire you to think about ways in which you can increase your joy so that you are experiencing this even as you're continuing to lead under pressure. So going back to, you know, this journey, so this is the journey including, you know, past with my feet well on the ground, but really heading more into the future. And this is what, you know, as you're building joy for the future, your own joy, your own experiences, your own vision board of some sorts, what is it that you really strive to do in that future? So think about some of these things for consideration. So as you could see, you know, I plan on being very present in my family's life and, usually including travel. But at the same time, I have other projects and interests, like, we now have an app where we're going to start beta testing today. We're already trying to do these things, so always trying to continue to move forward. I haven't shared this with you, but so my husband is a neurologist and he's super dedicated to helping patients with ALS. He's been a very successful neurologist who conducts research, and there's a huge philanthropic arm to all the work he does. And we're buddies. We are coaches of one another. We're advisors of one another. And we've been together for close to 40 years by now. So stuff like that. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to, open this up for everybody to, ask questions, make comments. Go for it.
Gaby, thank you so much. So look, we have, some questions in the chat, so I'll start with some of those questions. But if you actually have another question you want to ask live, just raise your virtual hand in the corner and we will look for you, although we have a lot of people here, so I'm just scanning. But one of the questions, Gaby, that we have here is the, other than, first of all, a question of how did you manage all of this at such a young age, doing everything you did? But we'll leave that as a rhetorical question because you're teaching us how you managed it, but it is amazing, the accomplishments you have. But one of the things that we have a question is, how important is a spiritual practice alongside practical practice?
In my opinion, in my humble opinion, bringing in that spiritual aspect to everything that we do has been very important. And I would say that that was one of the reasons why I implemented hypnosis in my overall practice as well. Many people who came in had gone through trauma, and sometimes super serious trauma. And in some other instances, they wanted just to feel more insightful about their lives, finding meaning about their lives. Imagine if you've lost it all and you need to start to find meaning out of staying alive and moving forward. That's where I really do feel that spiritual path has been super important. And in my case, I would say right now, I am inspired to give and to share the lessons learned so that, if I can contribute in any shape or form to other folks leapfrogging, going a little bit faster, less, learning from others and just going again, a little bit faster. I think that comes from some spiritual interest on my end too. It's like, this is the time to kind of give. So I would say, and I did incorporate it. I didn't present it. I didn't bring it as part of this presentation. I have a whole bunch of other presentations, but for example, if you look at, if you look at, the individual person and their health dimensions, I love to always talk about the physical, emotional, cognitive, social, spiritual performance and productivity as a part of everything. It's not just one or the other. But I also try to conceptualize it for the organization. I find that organizations have very similar dimensions, and the more that we can align and integrate ourselves with those organizations, that's where I've seen people who have done so well in an organization for 20, 30 years, and other folks who've just felt like, I don't fit in, I need to find my own path. So the spiritual part for me is super interesting, and I found it very rewarding as well. So.
All right. Thank you. Now, I'm going to lead in what you just said about kind of the parameters. Just another question is, in your research and in your book and your writings or consulting, have you explored the leadership under pressure, what it looks like in different industries? Has that ever come up, as far as there's clearly industries where there's higher pressure and industries where there's not, but have you have you seen that? And can you speak to that a little bit? And if yes, you have seen it, just can you share any insights on adapting to particular environments in addition to the behaviors that you've outlined?
You know, I presented Leading Under Pressure to a Coca-Cola group in Australia and Asia. The gathering was in Bangkok a few years back. They were all in global security. And the reason why I had become involved with Coca-Cola was post-kidnapping cases. So I was already working in those critical events. Now, the interesting thing with this presentation is I went in and said, these are some of the findings I've had with executives and professionals in the United States. Does this apply to you? Because these were the heads of security of, in, you name it, Vietnam, Japan, China, India, Australia. And we were probably, I don't know, they were probably about 30 people. And everybody went yes, this is what affects me too. So I have, in part that I've given presentations to different groups, like for example, Microsoft, or like KPMG, the Cleveland Clinic. I mean, and on the medical side, this resonates obviously with many of us. Now, just to share with you another important factor as well, which I think is interesting with the different groups. When I was in the Air Force and I mingled with pilots, I could tell that some of these pilots who fly the F-16s are perfect. It's there's something to them from a mental perspective, focus perspective, physical perspective. So that group tends to be super resilient in very many ways. So you could kind of see that, staying cool, and being able to kind of address whatever is needed to be done. I would say that it would be very important for each one of us to identify our own selves and how it is that we deal with stress or critical events or really hard things, or what would destabilize us, because we may react in very different ways. So for example, in my husband's case, he was in charge of the ALS neuroscience group at a hospital, and he was brought in as a deputy chief medical officer a month before the pandemic hit. So during the pandemic, he became incident commander for the whole hospital, needing to anticipate things before they actually happened. You can just imagine. And but I would have said that he handled stress beautifully, although there were times in which it was hard for him to sleep at night if he didn't know if he was going to have enough ventilators, but he was always on resolution mode. Now, there would be some other people that would have just blanked. One of the people who was present during one of my presentations, I was asked if you could study this, if there's a pattern for profiles, and there actually isn't. We don't know who's going to respond well or not. And I actually had one of the top guys from the FBI attend that, that meeting, and he actually spoke to the whole group and stated that he froze during 9/11. So in 9/11, he just didn't know what to do. And his boss came to him, looked at him straight in the eyes and said, I need you to do 1, 2, 3, go. And that kind of brought him out. So I think that's where the self-understanding comes into play, and really realizing how well we can work through our strengths can be really helpful, and how cross-collaborating with other people where we can complement one another becomes such an amazing opportunity for us to mix and match and be able to thrive together. I think that, that's one of the things that I wanted to share with everyone. Of course, I wasn't able to do everything by myself. I had a ton of help. And it was interesting because if I go back, when my husband and I came to the States, we had just newly graduated in Argentina, both as physicians, but we didn't have money. We didn't have any funds. So we had to work while we took our exams and were able to validate everything. And then we were at the NIH, and we did residency programs. And from there, it was kind of easy, but it wasn't that we came with $1 million in our pocket. We were able to kind of go like, okay, now it's easy. And I don't mean to say, we all have different paths, right? So if you had the opportunity to have $1 million to get started, I think that's fantastic. I just didn't have that. So.
Hey, no, that's great. So one other, just carrying that on is, you talked about how different industries or different individuals might have different training that helps them under pressure, whether it's intentional for that or not. But can you also talk about boundaries, like how to, especially in the workplace, this audience, executive women or, mothers, people who are working with really stressful environments. Talk to us about, in addition to the behaviors, the boundaries, and what language should we be using with the people that we have to set boundaries with so that we can help our ability to deal with the pressure?
What a great question. And that's one of the toughest things, right? So for example, let's say that my time was up by 5 p.m. I was on call all night, and then the other person didn't come, and I had to leave, but I couldn't leave because there were sick patients. How do you deal with all of that? So for example, in our case, I would say, I really tried to predict or pre-see what was needed so that I could organize myself and not just, run from one place to the other and just not being able to do it. So, but on the other hand, let's say that I had not anticipated that situation and I had to go because, I had young kids and I had to go back home. So I would say that it's always a challenge, but I would really practice. This goes back to what is important to you. What are your values? What is important to you? And if you need to be there for your kids and nobody else can go there and take care of your kids while you're working or doing whatever else, you're going to need to get home. So you're going to need to do the impossible so that you can speak this as calmly as possible as you head back home. So I think it goes back to what is important to you so that you're not just, going everywhere and not keeping these things into consideration. And by the way, when I interviewed for my psychiatric residency position, I was, 25 years old in Washington, D.C. And I was asked who was going to take care of my kids while I was at work. Of course, my husband was never asked that question, but during his residency, but, I was like, we have a live-in nanny. And quite frankly, in our case, because we were 2 residents, it worked super well for us because sometimes we had to go to work at 5 a.m. or it snowed or whatever other problem. And we always felt that that was helpful to our needs. But other than that, I would really say first of all, think what is important to you. Do you really need to do this? And if you need to do that, whatever it is that you need to do, you have to be able to verbalize what's important to you and why it is that you need to do something else.
That's fantastic. And that was Michelle Lutz gave us that question. So she's very attuned to this. Thank you, Michelle. I think we have time for one last question. If anybody has one more to throw in the chat that you want to do, but I do have one, is also just talking about what you just said about kind of how we have to verbalize it. Do you find, or can you talk to us a little bit about any common misperceptions about women, especially executive women in the workplace or in our environments, that there are misperceptions about how we behave under pressure, that helping to turn those perceptions around, what do we do? That's a big topic, but I'll ask that question.
It's a huge topic. The first thing that came to mind is that in my experience, most people thought I was single or divorced with no kids when I would give these presentations. Like for some reason that was the vibe that I gave. And so sometimes it's those biases and preconceptions that we have about, all of these issues. So in my mind, it goes back to trying to figure out what is important to you and see how it is that you can convey it. Because not all executives are the same. And people may feel different about, different issues. And so I think that finding that uniqueness in terms of who you are and your needs and wants would be one of the most important things that I think would be worth discussing with an employer, with other, partners, and whoever else, so that they don't make assumptions about you and who you are, particularly if you're very successful. A common assumption is that you must be on your own. No, don't get me wrong. My husband says he's a total hero for being with me for so long, like meaning it's work for him because he's more easygoing than me. So it, like in a way, it's like finding ways to have fun and be open. But I think it is important for us to figure out how it is that we can be our own selves. I think that over time, I have felt more comfortable in my own skin and being more of my own self as I've related. One of the interesting things with Phoenix is that my counterparts, I'm probably about 15, 20 years older than all of them. And just, they're mostly guys, all based in Seattle, very different, background, tech guys. And it's been a blast working together for the past few months. So having the time to learn about one another, I think would be interesting. But I think, yeah, the bias issue is one of the biggest things. I think from a cultural perspective, the bias issue is also a big thing because we may all be placed together as women, and there may be different backgrounds, different interests, different ways in which we communicate, verbalize things, different experiences. I don't know if many of you or most of you were present during Guy's presentation yesterday. I thought it was fantastic. It was very inspiring. But one of the things that I was thinking about was, sometimes people would not feel so comfortable opening up about certain things that could set, bring in too much attention to them and what they perceive or feel politically speaking. It's like if you're working in a large company, you would probably hesitate about saying certain things. And I think for women in particular, that's been a pattern that I've seen, because many of us have tried to, like wear the suits or shorter hair or whatever it is to fit in, no colors. Over time, you're like, okay, but what makes you yourself? So ideally, I would try to invite everybody to create your own journey board and your own, future board that kind of fits into who you are and what makes you you and what really makes you inspired and what really brings you with that life purpose that you may have.
That is great. Thank you so much, Gabby. And I will say one thing you are bringing, you have a great smile and you have positivity, just even on a Zoom, your positivity is amazing. So thank you. I think we're at the end of our time, but thank you for the presentation today. It's really fascinating. I took a lot of notes. And Michelle, thank you for introducing Gabby into our events network, and we hope to see more of you. But everyone who attended today, thank you so much for coming. And just keep looking at our events schedule because we have more good things to follow on Gabby's presentation. But anything that you have ideas, we also have a group of volunteers with Deborah who are looking to set up more great presentations like this. So if you have a speaker or you yourself would like to speak, please contact us, and you can always get us through the HBSWA administrator. I think Alexi can put the address in the chat, but we're easy to find. But thank you for coming, and thank you, Gabby, for sharing your expertise today. We really appreciate it.